Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Cheeky Natives. As you know, I'm in America and I thought it would be amazing to also expose you to some of the writers that we've been following for a long time who are in America and who we happen to also have access to, and we're really privileged for the access that we have to these writers. And on today's episode of the Cheeky Natives, we'll be talking to an incredibly talented spoken word artist who's written a book called The Land of the Living. We'll be talking to the amazingly, incredibly talented Ashlee Haze. Hi, Ashlee.
Hello, Cheeky Natives.
How are you doing?
I am well. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. I guess the first question that we'd like to ask our guest on the podcast is to tell us who you are in your own words, because I mean, we can read what your book says about who you are, but I think it's important for us to hear it from the person. So who is Ashlee Haze?
Ashlee Haze is a communicator first, and poetry is probably my most prominent form of communication. I'm a writer, I'm a creator, I'm a lover, I'm a philosopher, I'm a laugher. That's who I am.
Laughing is really good. Laughing is really good.
It is terrific.
And I mean, you wrote this incredible book called The Land of the Living, and even just from the title, I'm captured from the title, The Land of the Living. Want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually pulled directly from a Bible verse.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible says, surely I will see of his goodness and mercy in the land of the living, which means that, I feel like we don't have to wait to heaven to get what's good for us. We can get it here,
So, I mean, I suppose it comes from, the first question would be, because you're quoting for a Bible verse, you have quite a strong relationship, or do you identify as a Christian?
I do.
Okay, so do you want to tell us how that has been for you, especially in this like spoken word scenes where people are not supposed proclaim whatever they are in terms of Christianity and stuff like that. How has that been for you, being Christian and being a poet and a communicator?
It has worked well. I identify Christian primarily, but I'm also becoming super aware of original, the religions we had before the Atlantic slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out how that works into my belief system.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think my work details my beliefs without being preachy, and also very, very much I own my beliefs as my own and not as universal. So that is what kind of keeps me grounded as a communicator.
Mm-hmm. And I know your book is obviously separated into certain parts, and the first part of your book is grief. And I think, I guess I'm going to tell this story every podcast that I'm in for the next year, probably. About 3 months ago, while I was starting my master's here in the States, I got a call from back home that my mom had passed away. So I had to make, this whole 27-hour trip back home all by myself.
And you was where?
The funeral was in South Africa, so I was in LA, and I had to just go back to South Africa to go bury my mom.
I'm so sorry.
And I read this piece of yours called "This Spot Just Won't Come Out." And you say, "My father died, and every morning I wake up with grief outstretched, covering like an extra blanket, grief dripping down the walls, grief rising from my clothes like cheap perfume, grief stuck under my shoes like steeped in gum, grief in the crevices of my teeth, grief spilled on the rug I bought. This grief, this tugging feeling, it's ugly all over, and I get it all over again." And it really captures the essence of the period that I'm in right now. I think for me personally, and I want to talk about, if you remember, when you lost your dad, this experience, because I think it's detailed in your poem. For me, it's like the mornings and the evenings are harder, because during the day I can spend with people, but when I'm alone, like you say, this is when every morning I wake up with grief outstretched, covering me like an extra blanket. And I want to know, do you believe that writing has been cathartic for you and helped you through the grief process?
Absolutely. Writing is the only way I think I could have overcome something like that. Well, writing is my way, right? Because they're visual artists, they're dancers. But for me, writing is my therapy. That's how I get those feelings out of my body and onto a piece of paper.
And how are you feeling now, with the loss of your dad, like looking back, how are you feeling about it now? Do you think that, people like saying time heals everything? Do you think that's true?
I think that yes, but I don't know that it's a wound that will ever fully heal. But in terms of degrees, and I am better now than I am the first day, or the second day, or the first month, or the first year. It shows up in different ways. I think grief never really leaves you. It just changes form.
Yes.
And so the form may not be as daunting now. It may be a song on the radio, whereas, anything could be triggering that first day or week,
And I mean, it seems your book takes a natural progression, because you speak about grief in the first poem and then you move on to speak about Lazarus. Is it possible for you to read Lazarus to us and then for us to have just a bit of a discussion about like the prophetic power of what you speak about in Lazarus?
Oh, okay, Lazarus. When Lazarus fell sick, Mary and Martha ran to Jesus to tell him the news. They were expecting a miracle. And Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, sent them back to Bethany. When news came that Lazarus had passed, Mary and Martha ran to Jesus and lamented, "Had you been here, then he would not have died." And Jesus replied, "Don't you know he had to die in order for me to perform a miracle? After all, where's the magic in giving life to the living?" And then 4 days later, Jesus went to the tomb where Lazarus lay and commanded him, "Rise up and walk." And he did. And that day, Lazarus became living proof that not even death can stop a miracle. When my father fell sick, I ran to Jesus to tell him the news. I was expecting a miracle. And Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, sent me back to where I came from. When news came that my father had passed, I ran to him and lamented, "Had you been here, then he would not have died." And I heard a voice reply, "Don't you know he had to die in order for me to perform a miracle?" But to my dismay, when he came, it was not my father that was raised from the dead. It was the parts of myself that I had buried with him. I had reasoned that I could no longer behold, so I amputated the parts of myself I thought I could live without. And I heard somebody say, "Did you not think that I could still raise you from the dead? Did you think that just because I waited 4 years to come that I could not still make a miracle out of you? Yes, your daddy is dead, but your father yet lives. Rise up and walk. Open up your lockjaw mouth and release the winged creatures you have trapped in your chest. You can still be a poem when he is not here." I did not know that I could still be a poem. I did not know what to be. The Mary and Martha in me did not think that I could still be a miracle, but here I stand 6 years later. The stone rolled away from my tomb. If you look closely, you can still see the bandages on my hands and feet. You can still smell the scent of the grave in my clothes, but know that I am living now, because not even death can stop this miracle.
Come on. Snaps, man. I think for me, this is deeply profound, Ashlee, especially when you say, you buried the parts of you with him. Yes. And I feel like I've lost, 3 women that have raised me in my life. I've lost my mom, I've lost my aunt, and I've lost my grandmother. And these are the women that have really created who I am today. The politics that I have are because of the moldings of these women. And I feel every death that happened, there were parts of me that I buried with them. And I could relate because I think the experience of being here in LA for me have really now being Jesus performing the miracle of resurrecting me from my death. There are parts of them that are now being raised up in me. I wrote a piece about my mom for the woman that raised me and just the different parts of what they have done in my life. And through writing that piece, it was making me realize that, actually these women live boldly and strongly now than they did before, because I'm able to appreciate them more now than I did when they're alive. And do you think that there's a different dimension of a relationship that you have with your father now that you didn't necessarily have with him when he was alive?
Yeah, so I have this theory that my dad's parenting has just changed forms,
Mm,
right? So that it's not just an earthly thing. Like I always use the example, like when I get a few extra fries when I order food, that might be my dad giving me a little bit from the other side.
mm,
When something amazing happens, or even when something bad happens, but then it ends up working out. I feel like there's still that lingering feeling that he's doing the parenting just from the other side.
mm. I agree. I think, like, for me, like, even just the experience of being in this country and meeting all the people that I have met, um, it's been interesting to see how, like, my parents are taking different forms. Like, there are things that I never imagined would happen.
Yeah.
And they are happening now to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, wow, this is amazing. Like, and I think I wrote a piece later on because I had spent some time in New York with my friends and with his family, and it was just like I had never met these people before. This was the first time that I was meeting them, but the time was set up in such a way that I never felt like an outsider. And for me, it was like my mother mothering from the other side, like ensuring that I am with family and people that will hold me close during the first festive season when she was away, the first Christmas that I'm away from home, and I've also lost her. So I definitely agree with you that, it's our parents take different forms.
Absolutely.
I also really enjoyed. I enjoy your writing because I think like it's really poignant, but also really important. Here, when you speak about when a pen becomes a weapon against yourself, and Sarah Blade is still dead. Black Poet Tip 1. If you wait until the last day of submissions, you can always add another name to your list of poems about dead black bodies. And you want to speak a bit about that because I think it's deeply profound, even though it's a short piece.
So yeah, that's one of my micros, and it was super disheartening to write, because I realized a lot of times poets we resurrect names in our work, right? Names of people that we don't know, but the world comes to know because of their death. And it's so crazy that should you be in the midst of a list poem like that, or should you be in the midst of writing that piece, there's almost new material every day. Like, you always add someone to the list. And how do you like walk through the world like that? Like, it's so crazy. And that's why I said when a pen becomes a weapon against yourself, because in the midst of this, I think we lose a part of ourselves, with the sadness and the sorrow and the grief that we carry.
Yeah.
There's a grief that comes, I think, when someone you don't know passes, but you know that it could have been someone you knew.
And I think we need to also talk about the relationship that we as black people have with our mothers. Is it possible for you to read the casket contrapunctual, or the wife my mother never stopped being?
Ooh, yeah, I can do that one. But I've read this one aloud maybe more than once. So contrapuntal's work where you read one side and then the other side, and then you read them together. So mind if I read it in length that way?
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. My mother has always been a certain woman, always had a knack for the details. She signs on all the dotted lines, her signature a hymn I know by heart, but something in this song is a first Sunday communion. It is a taking of blood, wine, and bread bodies. It is the burden of being chosen while wishing not to be. But look how she dances when she thinks no one is watching. Look at the balm oozing from her bones. She is my pomegranate promise in this land of the living. My mother is the tea Ruth drank in the morning. Nothing unfaithful lives here. What do you think about the blue with the silver trim? Make sure that button is straight, okay? Yes, I'll take responsibility for the charges. Do you think he would like that? The font is wrong in all the worst ways. There is no one else who can do this. There is no one else I will let do this. There is therapy in this aching chaos. There is healing in this rugged moment. There is something necessary in the choosing. know that this will not make a martyr out of me.
I think,
So, go ahead.
I think what's deeply profound about the poem for me is we always speak about our mothers outside of who they are. You know, she's always a wife, a mother, a sister, but she's actually never herself. And in some ways, I like what you do in this poem, because what you do is you do to celebrate her. You know, you say, but look at how she dances when you think no one is watching. Like those little moments that our mothers have to themselves. And that's deeply profound for me, but also in the same light that they exist parallel to being our mothers, to being wives, to being these people. Whew.
You know who changed that for me? Actually, it was Beyonce. And she does a part in Lemonade where she says, "Your mother is a woman." And of course, we instinctively know that.
Yes.
But to think of her as a woman outside of her relationship to you.
Yes.
That is a thing that I think that we don't do often enough. And I'm very much learning to have conversations with my mom about who she is as a woman and who she was before me.
I mean, I think it's important for me because I had a really challenging relationship with my mom. And that's what makes like the grief harder, because I felt that there were still many unresolved things. But one thing her death made me realize is that my mother was operating from a place of trauma. Like, this world is traumatic and seeks to pillage, kill Black women every single day. She was raised with trauma, and she's always been operating from the place of trauma. And I'm coming in from a place of being a child without understanding that this Black woman is a woman who has been traumatized, because I'm expecting her to just be a mother and to not be a woman, to not be herself. And since her passing, like, I've been going through like a lot of events and a lot of things that happened in our relationship, and understanding, like Beyonce is saying and like you say in this poem, that my mother is a woman. My mother is a Black woman. My mother is a Black woman in this world that seeks to always invalidate her. She was a Black woman that in this world that seeks to always invalidate her. And I never got to see that, because I always got to see her as my mom. And if she did something wrong, I was like, oh, mothers are not supposed to do this. Like, how dare she? But
we're so judging.
Yeah.
Rarely can we forgive our parents, you know?
Yeah. So I think that this is what I enjoyed about that poem, is also having a reflection of my mom being a woman. My mother is a woman. She's not just a mother. So thank you again for this piece, because I think it's profound, and thank you to Beyonce for giving us this revelation.
It actually might have been Beyonce via Warsan Shire. I think Warsan Shire wrote that.
Yes, Warsan. Yes, Queen Warsan. Yes. Oh, that's really interesting, and you could be true, because Warsan has an anthology of poems called "Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth," and in that piece, she does in her anthology, she does things for women that it's incredible. She writes about Miriam Makeba. And she says, you know, my parents used to play your music at my parents played your music at their wedding. They called you Makeba, never Miriam, never mother, never lover, never wife. And just, again, this reiterating this whole idea that, like, these women are seen outside of who they are. Like, Miriam Makeba was seen as a civil rights movement activist. She was seen as an incredible musician, but she was never seen as a woman, as a lover, as a mother, as a woman, you know. So yeah, Wasan, shout out to Wasan.
Yeah, the identity outside of the titles you carry.
And I also, is it possible to read what looks like church on a Saturday night? Because I've been really thinking about, like, the idea of seeing people for who they really are. And also acknowledging people to be like, you know, Ashlee, I see you. And I'm not saying that I see your work, but I see you, and I see you for who you are. And I think this piece speaks to that.
Yes, so this piece I wrote from my hometown of Chicago. Because I felt like in the midst of the violence that, you know, gets the notoriety it does, we lose the narrative of the women who are often left behind. You know, the lovers of the men who were killed, the mothers of the men who were killed. So I wrote this poem called What Looks Like Church on a Saturday Night.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it is to be an unheard prayer, to be the whisper under the orange glow of the streetlights, to be the black body when the gunshots ring and the sirens blast, and to see the black body before it turns blue, before the boys in blue come, before his mother sees the shell of a boy she once carried, and we are always there, aren't we? We lovers of boys who are magic and disappear just like our fathers taught them, we women, who bring the bandages and the salt, and the tears and the flowers, and when there are no flowers, we bring ourselves. And we unlearn love every time they are taken away. And the chariots made of blue lights, of black bodies, always take them away, don't they? But they don't see the wound it leaves in us. They don't hear the earthquake it makes of our wombs. They don't see us drinking the blood and breaking the body. To the women, I need you to know this. You are the hallelujah that lives off 93rd Street. You are a third day rising in the morning. You are what home has always been, and I see you. When you feel invisible, I see you. When the city is dark, I see you. And I have never beheld anything more beautiful.
Power to these women. Power to these women. It's interesting because I've been reading Michelle Wallace, Black Marcher and the Myth of the Superwoman. And she speaks about this idea, and I think like it's a big conversation in Black feminism that Black women have always been the architecture of movements, right? Black women have always been at the forefront of war, at the forefront of everything. Like you say here, we women who bring the bandages and the salt and the tears and the flowers, when there are no flowers, we bring ourselves. Black women have always been that, but we don't talk about Black women in celebratory fashions. So this is what I really appreciated about this poem, because I think it speaks about the power that Black women hold, the place that Black women hold in our lives, the place that Black women hold in revolutions, the place that Black women hold in movements, because we see them. Even though they're not celebrated, we see them. So thank you again for this insightful piece about like seeing these women who are said to just exist and are not there, but they are the ones who are always showing up, always showing up. Do you think that the narrative is changing with movements like Black Lives Matter, which centers Black women, which was founded by Black women? Do you think that the narrative will change around how we see Black women in movements and how we see Black women?
I hope so. I think that now we see such an influx of visibility, right? I think that was the first thing for the Black woman to be visible. There's a quote that says, being a Black woman in America is like growing up in a house and never seeing any pictures of yourself on the wall. That's an amazing life to live. To turn on the TV and not see yourself for years, for decades, for hundreds of years. But now I'm so grateful to the Black women who make visibility a priority, for the Ava DuVernays, for Issa Rae, for the queer women who created Black Lives Matter, you know what I mean, to make sure that our names are not silenced, that our voices are heard, and that we have spaces and platforms. And I'm so excited for this and to be a part of it and to just lend my voice to whatever it is that elevates our platform.
I think it's important. I listened to your poem Reclamation in 3 parts. And wow, because I think that is the struggle. I think it also connects with your poem in the book. I'm just trying to find the name. Shake What the Motherland Gave You.
Yeah, I figured that was it.
Is it possible to just read Shake What Your Mamaland Gave You, and then we can talk about the 2 poems in together?
Yeah, in tandem, sure. And he says, real women don't twerk. And I say, oh, really? Last time I checked, what I do with my behind doesn't make me hold my head any less high. I remember. Before you called it twerking, me and my cousins would pop in the backyard at the family reunions, and it didn't make us any less women. I remember watching my mother and her sisters move their hips like there was freedom in their bones, and it didn't make them any less goddess. We, have been shaking our behind since before we knew what foreign soil tasted like back home. Call it mapuka, call it kukure, call it sacrifice for the gods. And I will present my offering every time I hear Cash Money Records taking over for the 9-9 in the 2000s. I will not let you tell me that the Africa in my back is something that I should be ashamed of. I will not let you tell me that I should quiet these drums. I will display them for all the world to see. They are mine. They are mine. They are mine.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think the two poems, Reclamation in 3 parts and Shake What the Motherland Gave You, speak about your politics. And particularly your politics around womanhood and your politics around feminism. Would you like to expound on what those politics are?
Yes, so I think to simplify it, I would say I'm anti-respectability. Mm-hmm. I do not believe in this idea that, a degree makes you more worthy than a woman who uses sex work to get out of an abusive relationship. Mm-hmm. I don't buy into that, modesty over freedom of choice, Mm-hmm. I think that if you really are a feminist, you believe that these things can exist in the same plane, where I don't have to be one type of woman. I say in Self-Reclamation in 3 parts, I twerked across the stage to get my degree.
Yes, queen. Yes, queen.
I can write poems to the tune of, Bodak Yellow. And I don't think that I hate this idea that, and to be quite frank, this idea that a lot of Black men are responsible for, and saying that you got to be either or, and only the either or the or is worthy. How many times do you see a picture of Erykah Badu side by side with Beyonce, and people are like, well, why be eye candy when you can be soul food? Like, I can't multitask. Like I can't do all of these things in a day and be all these facets.
And I think also the idea that womanhood and Black womanhood in particular is monolithic. There's only one type of womanhood. You have to be intelligent. You have to be prim and proper. You can't be sophisticated. There isn't space for Black women to exist in their full spectrum. There isn't spaces for Black women to twerk, to have degrees, to write poetry, to know English, to listen to Bodak Yellow. There's only a space for Black women to be a certain type of woman, which is problematic for me because I think it essentializes and creates like this monolithic understanding of Black womanhood, which doesn't give a space for Black women to bloom in their fullness. And also constructs like a certain femininity that you're only woman if you're this. And if you don't do this, you aren't women. So I like the fact that she's saying, I've never thought about it this way, but I really like it when you say you are anti-respectability, because that's essentially it, right? It's the idea that you need to be respectable in order to get things in life. But why can't I be all these things? Why does the fact that I twerk take away from the fact that I have a degree or that I have a brain?
And I am worthy of respect even if I didn't attain that degree, right? Even if I was monolithic in the sense of I don't know anything but poverty or struggle or sex work, why am I still I'm not less human for that monolithic experience.
And that is true. I think also it's the idea that in society we hold certain pedestals for women, and we want them to obtain certain things in order for them to even be worthy of the term womanhood. I read a paper recently about Black women, the law, patriarchy, capitalism, and racism. And one thing that I was looking at is the construction of motherhood, especially in the United States, where like motherhood for Black women is devalued, whereas motherhood for white women is held up. So there's also this idea of what we think Black women should be. There's a lot of writings that are done about the child welfare system, about like Black mothers who use drugs and how the law, sort of has given them a badge of dishonor, which is incorrect because, like, why can't you be who you are and still be deserving of respect?
And the answer is I can.
Yeah, Exactly. You can be whoever you want to be. Because for me, I think there is also a lot of conversation around when Lemonade came out about, people being like, oh, Beyonce is commercializing feminism. This is not the feminism that we're looking for. And I'm like, firstly, what is feminism? Who are you? Who are you? Are you the gods of feminists to have decided what feminism looks like? Because why can't you be Beyonce and represent feminism and represent a certain brand and a certain type of feminism and be Bell Hooks and be Audre Lorde and be Ashlee? Why can't black women be allowed to be black women and still be feminist in the way that feels most authentic to them? Why do we have to create certain tropes of feminism?
Because God forbid you experience intersectionality in feminism.
So I really like the politics. I think also another poem that was really, I think it's really short but very deep for me, is For the White Man Who Touched My Hair in the Backwoods, North Carolina, Cracker Barrel. Tell the truth. If we were not alone in this public space, what else would you have touched without asking? I think it's multi-layered, this poem, and do you want to share your thoughts about writing it and the experience that led you to writing it? Okay. Yes, I was talking about the poem where you speak about the white man. Tell the truth. If we were not here in this public place, what else would you have touched without asking?
True life experience. I was going to a festival that I go to semi-annually, and backwoods North Carolina, outside of Asheville, and I was in a Cracker Barrel of all places. And this white guy.
What is a Cracker Barrel for South Africans who may not know?
Oh, Cracker Barrel is a breakfast place, but it's very much known for like vintage white advertisements, right? That's what they keep in the store. They all are from eras like the 40s and 50s when segregation was prominent. And now that I know better, I know I have no business eating at Cracker Barrel, but they also have very good pancakes. So I was in a Cracker Barrel, and this white guy comes up to me, and he picks up one of my braids and twirls it like a jump rope.
Okay.
He's like, I like these.
I like these?
Yes, just the fact that he felt like he touched my body, a part of my body, and not just like touched it lightly, like he picks it up and starts turning it as if it were a jump rope.
Yeah.
It was offensive or aggressive, or like check him about it, because I'm the only black person for miles, So that was what inspired that poem. But it really made me think about, if he's willing to use his privilege in front of all these people just to touch my hair, what else could he have touched without asking?
And I think also for me it touches about the violence that black women go through daily. Just the fact that like men have this entitlement, as men we have this entitlement to black women's bodies, in particular black women's bodies, because if he could touch you in that manner, like he felt entitled to touching you and also saying I like these, as if you exist for the colonized eye, as if you put those braids in for the colonized eye, you were like, okay, I'm going to put these on so that this white man can like them.
Correct.
So it's also like the idea that like it seemed that a woman do certain things to appease men, so women can't do anything just for themselves. But also the idea, just the violence, right? That if you were alone in an alley, if he was gutsy and ballsy enough, he could have even violated you right there, physically, sexually.
Correct, which is why I asked the question. If we weren't in this public place and I were to encounter you, what else could you have done?
Yeah. It's really saddening, and also even more scary now with #MeToo and all the sexual violence and rape and assaults that are coming out, that, we realize that women aren't safe. And there's been a lot of conversations around the idea that why are these women only coming out now? And for me, I'm like, well, patriarchy, misogyny, racism, and capitalism have not allowed these women to have a space to talk. You know,
Correct.
this doesn't mean that it hasn't been happening and these women are trying to get back at someone. It just means that there are now spaces. You know, I really like the work that Eva DuVernay does, because she's creating spaces for black women to exist in television so that they don't have to rely on these men anymore. Because, you know, some of these women were keeping quiet because it was their livelihood.
Their bosses were men. You know, they were being assaulted by people who determine whether or not, you know, they can feed their families. Yeah. Or they can keep the lights on in their house, which has happened way before show business.
Yeah.
When you talk about black domestic workers, when you talk about women in slavery, you know, just your body being a bartering tool to maintain your livelihood.
Yeah. You know, it's sad, and it's even sadder that it's been happening for this long. And when someone speaks out, we're still shocked. You know, we're still like, there's been also a lot of conversations about like wanting evidence from women. I'm like, isn't it enough that a black woman or a woman has come out and said she's been violated? Isn't that evidence enough?
And I think that moving to a victim-centered idea of assault and saying, I believe you, right?
Unreservedly.
I believe you. That is, that's going to push us further, because we put so much weight on the victim to prove that they were wronged, right? And I think that when you talk about justice, you do have to talk about, you have to discuss what it would be like if you were the aggressor, right?
Yeah.
You know, but there's something in saying, I'm going to believe you.
Yeah.
You're going to, and there will be consequences for your actions, you know?
More importantly, that you're not going to just exist. There will be consequences for what you did.
Correct.
Yeah. You know, we're also a literary podcast, so I think it's important for us to talk about, like, you know, who are some of the writers that inspire you? Who are some of the creators that inspire you? Where do you draw, like, inspiration from? And what are the books that have changed your life?
So many. Wow. I think that I first have to talk about the queen of spoken word, Patricia Smith, who perfected the form slam, and her book Should Have Been Jimmy Savannah has been a bomb in so many ways, because she's also from Chicago. And so identify a lot with her storyline, even though there's such a generational gap there.
Yeah.
Then there are Mahogany Brown, who just released her poem Black Girl Magic as a hardcover book. And Mo Brown does so much for the woman voice. Her book Redbone. Nayyirah Waheed, oh my goodness. Nayyirah Waheed is just amazing, because she's mastered the short form in a way that I had not seen it done before. She can do more with 15 words than I think I could do with 15 minutes. And it be such a bomb and such a jarring and such an unlearning. And I value her voice so much because it is a voice of a non-Westerner writing poems about the West and colonization and what that means. And I value that so much. So then Yrsa Daley Ward, who's amazing. I could go on for days. Dominique Ashaid, The Bomb, The Breaking. Who else?
Yes.
Amina Brown. I'm reading her book, How to Fix a Broken Record. So all of these women are women who have lifted me up, and who, just by reading them, I feel like I learned so much.
And what is the last book that you read?
The last book I read, I actually am not finished with Gabourey Sidibe's book, This Is Just My Face.
And, what books are you looking forward to reading this year?
So right now in my bag, I have Helium by Rudy Francisco.
Yes, yes.
What else am I looking forward to? I just downloaded like, can I say shit ton on this podcast?
Yes, you can.
A slew of books is what I downloaded. Let me see what's in here. Oh, so I actually hadn't gotten into Citizen by Claudia Rankine, so that's on my list. I feel so bad about it and guilty about it. Also, The Power of Vulnerability by Brene Brown. So trying to get into that self-work stuff. Also, Rachel Wiley has a book coming out. Rachel McKibben's Blood just was released. So I got a lot of stuff.
You got a lot of stuff to read. So we'll be checking you out on the Facebook and everything to see how it's going and how, like, if you've enjoyed them, so we can read them too, and our listeners can read them as well.
Yes, please.
I think what's important is also, like, this is the poem called Citation. You say, I sit back and watch white queer men who think they invented our will. The black woman was always first and last in the shadows of a dead drop. Remember to cite us in your work. And I think this is a huge problem. The erasure of black women in citations is a huge problem.
Yes, so I wrote this specifically because being an ally to the LGBT community, I find myself in spaces where, we're having fun and we're partying, and then a white boy might say, sister girl.
Or hunty. Yes, hunty.
And I'm just like, but am I your sister? Or, and so the right that some of them have to this culture, there's definitely a subculture that exists there, but also how have you been inspired by black women? The drag queens performing Diana Ross and Whitney Houston, and do you make a mockery of us to benefit your culture?
That's really deep. And I think in particular you talk about, queer white men, right? And how in some ways they adopt this black culture, a form of appropriation really, without really giving the respect that is due to black women.
Correct, absolutely.
I mean, one of my favorite poems, and one of the first poems that I heard, was For Colored Girls Who Don't Need Katy Perry When Missy Elliott Is Enough. And I think this is the poem we can end with. But firstly, I understand that you met Melissa Elliott.
Yes.
I would love to hear about that. How did it happen? Like, what was going on? How was it?
So it's just one of those crazy chain of events that you don't ever think will happen to you. So I wrote this poem, and it was such a stream of conscious poem because I was listening to like an old school radio station, and the song Not Tonight came on, which is Missy, Lil' Kim, Angie Martinez. Is it Left Eye in it? Yeah. So and the song is just saying like you think you're going home, but not tonight. Like you're not going home with me tonight. And it's such an anthem. And listening to it, I said, Missy was doing this intersectional feminism thing before we named it that. She was anti-slut shaming before we had the languaging for it. She would say, ain't no shame, ladies, do your thing. Just make sure you're ahead of the game. And so I was listening to these songs, and so I just began to write this poem because Missy Elliott was the first real role model that I had, somebody who looked like me, right? So I wrote this poem, and I performed it at Brave New Voices Atlanta, and the poem made the rounds, and it was retweeted by some, very prominent Twitter people. And so Missy tweets, I need to meet this girl.
Okay, come through.
And so she DMs me, which is the craziest thing in the world. And she's like, can I have your address so that I can send you something? And I'm like, sure, why not? But she's also not as stealthy as she thinks, right? Because she asked me if I would be home around a certain time. So I just went into black girl mode, and I'm like, let me clean my house just in case, right? And lo and behold, she shows up at my front door. So that was a story for the ages. So yes, I met Missy. She sat on my couch and we talked, and it's one of those experiences I'll be raving about for years.
Yes, I mean, yes. Missy has been so important just, for black women representation in hip hop. And for black women who look like Missy, who sound like Missy. Just, yes, Missy. So is it, do you mind just reciting this one?
Yeah, I would absolutely do it for you. For colored girls who don't need Katy Perry when Missy Elliott is enough. Third grade, I'm in the hallway and I'm sure I shouldn't have been, and Corey White comes up to me and asks, "Yo, have you heard the new Missy Elliott track?" And I reply, "Who is Missy Elliott?" At the time, my parents only let me listen to gospel in the smooth jazz station. But that day, I went home, ran upstairs to my room, closed the door, which is a cardinal sin in a black mother's house, and I waited on TRL to come on. And then it happened. Metallics in a trash bag fill my TV screen, and I hear the coolest thing I'd ever heard in 8 years of living. Beep, beep, who got the keys to the Jeep? Vroom. And at that moment, I had my entire life figured out. I was going to grow up to be Missy Elliott. I spent the next 10 years of my life recording and rewinding videos to learn dance moves, passing that Dutch, getting my freak on, and trying to figure out what the hell she was saying and work it. There were so many artists I could have idolized at the time, but Missy was the only one who looked like me. It is because of Melissa Elliott that I believe that a fat black girl from Chicago could dance until she felt pretty, could be sexy and cool, could be a woman playing a man's game and not be apologetic about it. If you ask me what representation in the media is important, I will show you my velour outfit and the matching Kango I begged my parents for. I will show you a woman who learned how to dance until she felt pretty. Feminism wears a throwback jersey, bamboo earrings, and a face beat for the gods. Feminism is the brat Missy Elliott and Lil' Kim on the Not Tonight track. Feminism says, as a woman in my arena, you are not my competition. As a woman in my arena, your light doesn't make mine any dimmer. Dear Missy, I did not grow up to be you, but I did grow up to be me and to be in love with who this woman is, to be a woman playing a man's game and to not be apologetic about any of it. If you ask me what representation is important, I will tell you. On days I don't feel pretty, I hear the sweet voice of Missy singing to me. Pop that, jiggle that fat, and don't stop, get it till your clothes get wet. I will tell you that right now there are a million girls just waiting to see someone who looks like them.
Yes. I think it touches on a lot of things, but more importantly, as you said, it was about representation. Black women being represented in music and television, just this constant theme of switching on music or the television and seeing yourself and being like, oh my gosh, like I can do that, I can be that person.
Absolutely.
And in some ways, this is what I do with my social media. I want people who are back home in South Africa who are following me on social media to see that they're represented and they can imagine to be where they are. June Jordan says, we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And I think that is so important, that we are the ones we've been waiting for. Obviously, Ashlee, your book is absolutely incredible and everyone deserves it. Yes, Cheeky Native listeners, you deserve this book. Where can we get your book, Ashlee?
It is available on Amazon.com. You can get Land of the Living. If you have Amazon Prime, the shipping will be free. If you want a signed copy, you can get it from AshleeHaze.com, AshleeHaze.com. The book is available along with other merchandise, and I will personally sign it and send it to you. The only difference is there is a shipping fee there. So whatever works best for you.
And then, Ashlee, where can we follow you on social media?
At Ashlee Haze. Instagram is at ASHLEEHAZE. Twitter is Ashlee Haze. Facebook is the Ashlee Haze.
Thank you so much, Ashlee Haze, for blessing us with your wonderful presence and your glorious, glorious healing words. I remember reading this book and thinking to myself, thank you for the work of healing. Painful as it is, but healing. And thank you for writing authentically about, Black women, about particularly, like, I think in some ways it's an ode to Black women because we aren't talking enough about Black women, with the violence that they've gone through, who they are, where they are situated, what they look like, what they're supposed to look like. So thank you for celebrating Black women.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you for doing this work and creating this amazing space and this conversation with me. Thank you so much for that.
No, thank you very much. And I think, yes, Chicken Native listeners, please do not DM the author. Get the book. As you've heard, it's on Amazon. And if you wanted, you can visit Ashlee's website. She's also on social media, has links to her website on social media. Do not DM the author. Don't be like, author, can I please get a PDF copy? Please don't do that. Support Buy Black. That's what we're about. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Ashlee.
Thank you so much, and have a great